Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me, Philip. And my name is Cristina Espiritu, and make sure that you're in the right place. So this one is from startup to exit, and this is how to value your business and maximize your success so you can eventually exit. And just a little bit about myself. So my name is Cristina. I'm the managing director of Valuation Consulting, and I have 15 years of experience in business valuation. Just a little bit about myself. I have a JD MBA degree background. I have a lot of entrepreneurial experience in different industries, which helps me in business valuation. And I've also been a startup mentor, and I have recently become a certified court mediator. And all of these experiences, though varied as they may be, have greatly contributed to just my expertise in business valuation. And so the agenda today is just three things. A is, when do you get a business valuation? Second is, how do you value your business? And third is, how do you maximize the value of your business? And those are the three things that people usually ask me when they're asking for what my expertise is. So first, and as we go through this, just if you have any questions, just let me know, and we'll just make it informal. So first is, how do you get a business? When do you get a business valuation? A lot of times people say, okay, well, do I need a business valuation when I'm at the startup level, or when So a lot of times people just don't know when they should get it. So typically there are three ways, three different buckets on when people get a business valuation. So the first thing is transactional. And what does that mean? So basically, if you are considering some sort of exit in your business, whether it's an event of a sale or an M&A, or you wanted to you wanted to merge or acquire with another business, that's when you're looking for what your business is worth. And so you need a business valuation. Second is when you're developing value enhancement strategies. So what that means is that if you're looking to get a base value of what your business is worth, and you eventually want to sell it later on, and you wanted to find out the strategies that you can do in order to enhance the value. And then the third is when there's an inflection point in your business. And so this is related to the second one. So that means it's if you have lost or gained a customer, or you've lost or gained a product line, then it's probably time to get a business valuation, because that means there probably has been a change, whether it's good or bad. And then the second bucket of when you get a business valuation is for compliance purposes. So compliance really means compliance with IRS or compliance with the SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission. So if you are doing some planning with your estate or gift tax planning, you do a business valuation with that. If there's corporate restructuring, if there's stock incentive plans, which means if you are doing some sort of stock compensation for your employees and you need to know how much your business is worth, then you do a business valuation. And also for financial reporting. So that's financial reporting with the SEC. And the third bucket is for litigation. So you do a valuation when let's say a couple is getting a divorce and they own a business together, or even if one couple owns a business and they need to split the assets, and they need to know how much the value of the business is. And then also second one is for disputes. So if it's a shareholder dispute or a partnership dispute, and then you need to know how much the value of the business is, then you do a valuation. And then the third one is for eminent domain purposes. So what that means is if a government acquires, if they're building some sort of public property like a bridge or something that's related to public works, and your business is basically, let's say, where they're going to build a bridge and they need to compensate you, then they need to know the value of your business. And that's called eminent domain. And then second tier is, how do you value your business? And this is typically the type of question that people are very curious about. And so this one will be, what we're doing will be a case study of how to value your business. And so this one is a hypothetical company called Shop TV Now. And I had done this case study a couple years ago to a group of entrepreneurs, and I think since then, this type of business has actually been started. But back then, this was a made-up business that I had as a case study. But this is called Shop TV, which is called Shopping at Your Fingertips. And so what we'll do is we'll go through a business, a hypothetical business, and how to value it. And then later on, we'll talk about how to maximize the value. So this hypothetical business is called Shop TV, and this is founded in 2018. And it is an interactive app that lets you shop for items featured in your favorite TV show or movie. And this hypothetical business is currently available on Netflix and working on contracts with other 2 streaming services. And this interactive app, which, as I mentioned, lets you shop for items, like if you're watching your favorite TV show. So right now, hypothetically, it's featured in one TV show. And what they do is you go to the TV show and then you click the app, and you can buy ingredients or cooking gadgets with one click through Amazon Prime. And currently, the business has 2 people in the team, with plans to hire with plans to hire 2 more in the next year as its sales grow. So that just sets up what the business model is. And so what the owners are looking for is they're looking for an investment of $100,000 for 10% of the company. So basically, this is similar to something like Shark Tank, where they're asking, okay, like if they're looking for an X amount of money and they're going to give X% of equity to the founders. So this one, if they're looking for a 10% $100,000 investment for 10%, so that means they're valuing the business at 1 million. So let's just make the numbers easy. And so there are different ways in order to value a business. So a business can either be called a going concern, which means it's it doesn't have plans to liquidate. So, and then there are also structures of a business where they're going through liquidation or bankruptcy. So depending on what level or stage the business is in, there are different approaches that you need to follow. But since this is going concern, or it's determined to last for several years or even into perpetuity, these are the typical approaches that we use to value it. So the first one is called an income approach. And the concept of an income approach is the value of the business is based on the future cash flows of the business, of the company. And a lot of its assumptions include forecasting the projected revenues and expenses until a stabilized period and developing a discount rate to account for the risk. So what this means is that, and we'll see it in an example below, is what this means is that you are forecasting the revenues, let's say for a period of 3 to 5 years typically. And then what you expect is that around that time is that it's been at a stable period, and then it's going to go through perpetuity. And it's gone through the typical life cycle, so that there's no highs and there's no lows. So then at a certain period after 5 years, it's going to be at a stable period. And then what you do is you develop some sort of discount rate in order to account for the risk associated with running the business. And then the second method that's typically used is called the guideline company method. And this one really values the business based on the trading multiples derived from publicly traded companies that are similar to your company. And that it includes identifying what the comparable companies are that are public, because we can get the data, and then adjusting the multiples for differences in the size and the risk of these big companies, right? Because they're going to be public companies compared to what your company is. And then you're applying the adjusted pricing multiples from the guideline companies to yours. And this one will make sense later on as we go through the example. And the typical multiples that we use for these are the revenue multiples, the EBITDA or EBIT multiples. So EBITDA is earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And then EBIT is just earnings before income taxes. And the third one, the third typical method that we use, it's called the guideline transaction method. And similar to the guideline company method, this is also called a market approach because it typically looks at what the market data is. And so it looks at market data similar to what real estate would be when you're valuing comps of, let's say of a property. So you look at you look at market data and you value a business also based on the pricing multiples. However, this one is derived from what companies have been sold that are similar to yours. So let's say with Shop TV is an interactive app. So we would look at something in the software industry. And so if you see comparable companies that have sold in that industry, then this is the data that we based it on. And this one includes finding transactions involving the purchase of comparable companies, selecting transactions that are similar to yours with regards to the operation, industry, and economic conditions. And then you're applying these multiples to what your company is. And typically the approaches are also the same, the multiples. So you're using the revenue, the EBITDA, and the EBIT multiples. So then now that we have a theory of what the typical guideline, the typical valuation methods are, now let's do a closer look at how we value Shop TV. So Shop TV, so the first one that we looked at the income approach. So as you remember, income approach looks at the forecasted, the forecast of the company maybe for 3 to 5 years. I'm looking at the revenues and the expenses, and then bringing them all back to the present. So this one looks at we look at the debt-free net cash flow, which is kind of the base of this approach. But the net free cash flow is coming from when you have your revenues and then you get to your expenses and you make some adjustments on your depreciation and capital expenditures, and you get to something called the net cash flow. So here, just to make it easy, we assume that the net cash flow of Shop TV is 100,000 for the next 3 years. So it's going to be 100,000 for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And then after that, we're assuming that they're going to be going into perpetuity at with a cash flow of 200,000. So as you see, maybe a little, kind of in the middle of the page, you'll see that there's a residual year cash flow of 200,000. So then this method, what we do is we look at the debt-free cash flow, and then we see that the ones that are in the future, they need to be brought back to the present, to the present, which is right now. And we do that because the value of money will be different from future till now. So then we do, as you see the highlighted, it's 20%. So we assume like some sort of discount rate of 20%, which is, that one is also based on, a few different assumptions, but just for simplicity's sake, we assume that it's 20% at this time for this. And then we do the sum of the periodic cash flows at 270,000, and then we look at the residual. And so we assume that the fair market value of the company here using the income approach is 1 million. So that's one approach that we have looked at. And so there are two other ones that we're going to look at. And so the second, and actually going back to this one, while this is a very typical method to use, the advantages are that it is, there's a lot of data points. So there's a lot of data points that we can look at. So there's a lot more peg to stand on. However, the disadvantage is also the same. Since there are a lot of data points, there's a lot of assumptions that you need to make. So a lot of times when, a business owner is asking, when you're asking a business owner what their revenues are 3 or 4 years from now, a lot of time it's a lot of guesswork. And so, you get a lot of data that may not be as accurate as you would like, but the good thing is that this is one of the 3 methods that we use. So it's kind of like looking at 3 pegs of a chair and making sure that they all kind of correlate somehow. So, and each method has their own positives and negatives. So it's just a matter of making sure that we kind of get the best data we have as possible. And please stop me if anyone has questions. And so the second method is, as you recall, it's the guideline transaction. So here it's looking at the different transactions that in the market that have happened. So let's say if there are, like app companies that are similar to Shop TV that has been sold within an X amount of time, then we can use that to develop something called a multiple. So a multiple, and let me go back to this one. So basically, this is how we derive the multiple. So let's say the target. So we have, as you said, like as you see here, we have the dates of the transaction. So these are transactions that have happened in the past like 5 years. So let's say 2013 to 2018. Some companies have bought these targeted companies that are in the app space, and here you'll see what the revenues are when they were bought, their EBITDA when they were bought, and then the market value of invested capital would be the price that were paid for them. And so here, like if you look at this column called MVIC/revenues, which is on the top right. So these multiples are the ones that we apply to the company that we're valuing. So for example, here, as you see, it's in a highlighted space. I have a median, which is 0.9 revenue multiple, and then an 8.9 EBITDA multiple. So this shows that, these are the range of multiples that you see from these target companies that have been acquired. And these are the multiples that we use for ours. So going back just one page, so if you recall, so it's 0.9 and 8.9. So if you go back here, what we look at on the farthest left column is that the value of the revenues of our company, Shop TV, in 2019 was $1 million, and then their EBITDA in 2019 was 120,000. So we get the selected multiples that we see from the transactions that have happened, and then what we do is we just simply multiply, let's say on top, the 1 million by the 0.9. So then their value using the revenue multiple is 900,000, and then the value of them using the EBITDA multiple is 120,000 times 9, which is the multiple from the EBITDA that we had gone earlier. So then, and then if you go farther to the right column, you'll see a weighting factor. So we weigh each one of them 50%. And then what we conclude here is that the value of Shop TV using the transactions that we had seen in the market using those multiples is $1 million, which just for simplicity's sake, I made it cleaner. So you'll see that it's also $1 million, similar to what it was in the income approach. Okay, cool. So now here we are. So this is the third one, which is the guideline company method, very similar to the market approach that we did for the transaction. But the difference is, instead of looking at transactions in the market that have happened, what we look are guideline companies that are public. And the reason why we look at the ones that are public, it's because they're the ones which has data available. So with this one, you're able to, to figure out like what their revenue multiples are. And here, just for simplicity's sake, obviously there's a lot more like research behind what drives these multiples and how they're derived. But what we looked at is like, what I had found was like, these are comparable companies to ours. And then these are the revenue and the EBITDA multiples that they have. And then we look at their range of multiples. And then based on just how comparable they are to the company that we have, right? Like, these are publicly traded companies. So they're huge. They may have multiple operations. They have a ton of people, and they have a lot of, management, like sophisticated management. So what we're going to look at are multiples at the lower end of the spectrum. And so, just going back here, what we are looking at is similar to what we had seen in the guideline transaction method, is if Shop TV's revenues are 1 million, and then the selected revenue multiple is 1, then their preliminary value conclusion using revenue multiple is 1 million. And then going down the second line, if the EBITDA that Shop TV has is 120, and the selected EBITDA multiple using this method is at 8, then the preliminary value conclusion is at 960,000. And typically, for simplicity's sake, I assume that the weighting factor is 50-50, because there may not have been any particular reason on why the revenue indication or EBITDA indication, it's much more convincing than one or the other. But typically, sometimes you'll have reasons on why one should be weighted higher than the other. Maybe the revenues are not as robust, or maybe the EBITDA is hard to, maybe not a lot of companies have EBITDA, or maybe they have negative EBITDA. So, these weighting factors just very different. They vary based on just based on different factors in the market. But here, what we're assuming is that based on the weighted indication, and then it's rounded, the market value of the company is 1 million, also based on the guideline company method. So then when we look at the conclusion, after looking, as I said before, looking at the 3 pegs, is that you look at the 3 pegs and you see that the guideline transaction method, guideline company method, and the discounted cash flow are all at 1 million, which, just for simplicity's sake at this point, it's a very clean number, but this one doesn't happen all the time. I mean, this probably happens about 1 or 2% of the time, which when you see that the indications are very similar, but but a lot of times they may vary. They may have a little bit of a range. But then when you find that if the range is too great between them, right? Maybe if the range is around 30 to 40% between them, then you know that either one method is not done correctly, or maybe you had picked something, maybe you need to pick different companies. So it's gonna get questions, whether it's from the IRS or SEC or your auditors, if you see that the numbers are so different. But typically the point of this is that you use different methods in order to get the 3 legs, the 3 pegs or legs of a chair, in order to get one concluded one. And please at this point, let me also know if you have any questions. So this one, I like to show this slide because the point of this is, you tell me what the value is, and then I'll show you the money, because you're looking for investment. And then the third topic that usually I get asked is, how do you maximize the value of your business? Because now that let's say that the value of your business is 1 million, then it's like, so what? Like, okay. A lot of times, like when people go to us, it's because they want to know how to maximize the value of their business. They want to, maybe go from 1 million to 5 million in X amount of years. And so what we do is we develop strategies in order to help them identify what they can do to actually increase the value of their business at a certain point, or after a certain time. But what we look at is what I typically tell business owners to do is to focus on the earning levels, and one is focusing on the bottom line. And so what does that mean? So that means when you're focusing on the bottom line, it's people usually look at the revenues, which is fine, because because we look at the revenues to get the multiples. But then what we should look for are really the true earnings of the company, which means revenues minus expenses, and what really is the profit. And then the second is focusing on the true earnings of the company. And people ask me, what does that mean? So what that means is that your valuation is really determined by the quality of these cash flows. So when you're looking at your business and you see that, let's say you've been around for 5 or 6 years, and then you see that you may have had a good year 1 year, 3 bad years, 1 good year. So there is some sort of inconsistency and instability with what the true earnings potential of your company. And if someone is buying you, then they're going to look at this and really question it. And so, companies that generate revenues with just single points, with just maybe 1 year, have greater volatility and may have losses. So that means they're a risky company, and risk is always, an enemy of a good valuation. And then, so one thing I tell business owners who want to exit at this point would be, if they're focusing on their earning levels, is also to clean up their personal expenses. Because what happens is that when they have, when it's a small business and everything, a lot of the personal expenses, such as your car, maybe your house mortgage, maybe your private jet, it goes through your books. When someone is buying your company, they're going to take a look at that and actually clean it up. And so what happens is that I always tell business owners to clean up their personal expenses before they even think about selling. So clean it up 3 or 4 years beforehand. And while this may affect the taxes, since now they have less expenses, and so now the taxes, they have more profit and taxes are greater in the short term, but it benefits the owner in the long term, because what happens is the valuation of the business could be higher. And so it will undoubtedly result in a higher value of your company when it's time to sell. So then the other thing I tell business owners that will help in maximizing the value of your business is to reduce risk. As I said before, risk is really the enemy of a good business valuation. It lowers down the value. So what I typically say is, and a lot of this is common sense, but it's just a matter of implementing it way in advance to make sure that you have ample time to reduce them or to actually make improvements if you need so, in order to increase the value of your business. So what I tell all business owners is to diversify the revenues. So diversifying the revenues, maybe diversifying their product streams. And then second would be differentiating their products or services. So it's a important priority for any small business to differentiate their product or business. So then you're not relying on one or the other. And if something happens to that product, whether it's recalled or a service that may have been a bad service, you have other streams of income to make up for that one. And so basically what you need to do is to develop or promote any patents, intellectual property, or any unique features of your products or services that would give you some advantage over your competitors. So then the third way to reduce risk is to demonstrate a strong management team. And what does that mean? A lot of times when the company, I've seen a lot of companies that are just based on one's owner, or once it's a sole proprietor, which is fine. But what happens is when they are acquired or where they're bought by another company, they're not buying you. A lot of times you're selling the company because you want to retire. And then what happens is you want to be able to make sure that the company can survive without you. And this goes along with establishing management succession. So you have to make sure that your business is more self-reliant. And so that means focusing on training employees to take over key responsibilities. So if you have multiple people to train and to perform key tasks, then you don't need to be there. It's called redundancy. And redundancy at a certain point is actually very helpful. But if you're too redundant, then that means you're inefficient. But a little bit of redundancy actually helps in making sure that there is a consistency and succession. And so the second thing I always tell entrepreneurs is to create processes and routines. So this goes along with, if you exit your business at this point, you want to make sure that there are processes in place so that when the new owners come, then they don't need you. And a lot of times at this point, what happens is that the old owner may have a 2-year consulting contract with the new owner in order to just help in transition. But then after that, they basically exit completely. And the third way that you can help maximize your business is obviously to maximize growth. And so that means, this is demonstrating a sustainable growth model, and then also improving the margins. So you want to make sure that before you sell, you want to chart better margins over several years. Because what happens is a company who wants to buy another one would look at historicals. So historicals may be 3 to 5 year historicals, and they will look at all these years and see if they have margins that are consistent year to year. Well, let's say if there is a dip in margin from one year to another, they will try to understand the factors and see if that's something that is just maybe something that's either the industry or the market and not a true flaw in the business model. And so owners must properly manage your expenses consistently and make sure that they plan for future expenditures. And then the last one, which I think is one of the most important ones, when you're trying to maximize the value of your business, is really to start early. So sale of a business usually takes about 6 to 12 months, and a lot of times it's longer, depending on the industry or the time. So right now, for example, if you were a restaurant and you're trying to sell your business, it's going to be pretty difficult, because what's going to happen is they're going to look at year 2020 and see that obviously there's a dip in margins, perhaps most likely for a lot of restaurants, and then they will base the price of what they're going to be paying for on that period, and maybe they'll look at historicals, but then they'll look at the most recent one. And so what we recommend is making sure that you plan at least 2 years before you embark on this process. And then what you need to do is, as part of the sales process, you will need a business valuation, and the buyers will need to confirm everything you need to tell them about the business. So this just results in a whole bunch of due diligence, as we call it, reviewing like both financial, legal, and any documentation that would be important, like like HR documents. So with that said, it's important to keep records of important documents. So you think not just the taxes, but maybe your manuals, any of your processes, your employee handbooks, any of your financial statements, so that it's just easier in the long run, and then you're not scrambling to maybe recreate some of them, especially as you're going through the due diligence process. So with that said, we also recommend cleaning up financials according to the standard GAAP procedures, which is the standard accounting procedures for the US. And that just makes, that also entails making sure that you organize, and then you keep records. And then the last, one of the last other ones is to making sure that you protect any of your intellectual property. So protecting any intellectual property means protecting your trademark, protecting your patents, and making sure that you have the appropriate legal protection for them. Because anything that's legally protected will be valued more than those that are not. So if you have a patent versus an unpatented technology, the patent will always make it more valuable. And the last one, which I think is also very important, is to be psychologically prepared. A lot of companies, business owners are older, especially now. They're the baby boomer age, and they think that they will never ever retire, and that they will run their business forever. And so when you're starting early, it is imperative to be psychologically prepared about making sure that you can basically distance yourself from the business and be able to sell it. I know it's your baby, but be able to sell it in the long run. So at this point, so those are just like the top tips that that I give for companies that are looking to maximize the value. And that's it, Phil. So if you, at this point, I was just gonna tell us just a little bit about us, but that's really the gist of just the 3 major topics.
Wonderful. This was really great presentation. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, and so with a lot of the we always see these great unicorns in startup land, and I'm just kind of curious. How many years does someone really need to be in business before they can get a valuation, or I should say, or seem a little less risky? Would you say 3 years or more, or is 2 years good enough? What do you see, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, good question. So basically, I have valued companies that are at the startup phase up to publicly traded companies. So basically, at the startup phase, because they don't have any revenues, like maybe you can't apply any of the methods. So we do this method called the cost approach, where the value of the business is based on what you put into it. So essentially, let's say it's you just started it, but you put money. Let's say you put 100 grand because you paid the lawyers for patents and accounts and stuff like that. So essentially, like the value of it would be the cost that you put into it, because you're gonna be recreating it. Because so that means you haven't really created any intrinsic value beyond what you put into it. But let's say at your point, but let's say you have a trademark or a patent, and then the patent you've already, even though you haven't done anything with the patent, but you can predict like how many, like in X amount of years this is going to be the market, this is how much we can do in revenues. Then you can do some sort of income approach, and then just put like a really, really high discount rate to quantify the fact that it's very risky.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
So it looks like Tianyun has a question in the chat box. She says, I have a question for companies impressed versus Series C. How is this guideline transaction method giving you different valuations? Or should I only look at Series C companies getting acquired for valuation if I am evaluating my company in Series C?
Oh yeah, so when you're looking at pre-seed. Oh, that's seed or C? Pre-seed?
Pre-seed.
Pre-series. Okay, so yeah, so basically what she's looking for is, let's say you have your company's has Series C funding versus maybe versus funding that's before C, right? So then how does how do you account for that when you're doing the guideline transaction method? Is that what's been asked?
I believe so. And Tianyun, you're welcome to go ahead and clarify.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you, Cristina. So the question is, I guess maybe I missed it, but I don't understand how if your company is at a different stage, how if you're using the guideline company method or the guideline transaction method, how is that compared to your company at your stage? Like if I use a public company or a company that's being acquired, of course they're a lot bigger, but if I'm evaluating that, but if I'm at a different stage, if I'm only pre-seed, I don't have any revenue, pre-revenue, versus I'm already series B, A, B, C, D, E, but if I still use the same method, that will give me the same valuation?
No, so what happens is that when you're doing the research in the companies, so as also when you're looking for, aside from looking at the size, right? So you're looking at the size, and then maybe you're looking at the operations. There's also data on the company. Let's say I've done a lot of tech and biotech, and then it will show you, okay, like this tech company or this biotech company has done Series A to Series C, and then with different indications. So when you're selecting guideline transactions or companies, then you just select those ones that are very similar to yours. So you can actually do that selection based on the database. Yeah. Or if you can, or sometimes it's a little bit hard to find like really comparable ones, then you just make adjustments. So you say, okay, the multiples are from, let's say 1 to 5, but then based on what you are and based on what they are, then you may try to find one. Then you may use a multiple at the lower end. So you say, okay, maybe I'll use 1 instead of 2.5 or 5, because just based on the description, yours warrants more of like a lower multiple.
So you're saying if I'm at pre-seed, then I would choose a lower multiple versus if I'm already Series B, then I would choose a higher multiple?
Yeah, because
If I
that means
cannot
that
find
when
companies, because if I'm pre-seed, I'm probably not going to be able to find one that's comparable that's already acquired, right?
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, and then what happens is like, typically the reason why, you when you're at like a higher seed, Series C or D, then that means that you have, I guess, investors have a lot more confidence in you. And it's
Mhm.
because your valuation, they think that the value of your company is higher. So then it warrants higher multiples.
Okay. But then if I'm pre-seed, I probably should not choose a guideline company method because I'm not even close to one that's already public.
Yeah, and pre-seed as in like your like you just got family and friends, right? Maybe like
Yeah.
that's a seed money that you have.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so then at that point, I think at pre-seed that I may also make the assumption that you are probably pre-revenue,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so then that means and then you're probably at a very early stage. So then
Mhm.
the valuation, the method that you're going to be using is different. It's going to be that cost approach, the one I talked
Oh,
about earlier, which
right.
means like what have you put in the company so far?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have a question about how much wiggle room is there when you find someone who's maybe been in business for, say, 30 or 40 years, they're looking to
Mhm.
retire, and maybe they look at it and they say, I kind of really want 1.5 million. And so
Mhm.
the valuation comes back at, say, $1 million. How much wiggle room do you have to kind of give the founder what it is that they're looking for versus just saying, what, this is what the valuation is, and we can't make any more wiggle room. How do you
So I guess, yeah. So I guess the question is, once they find out that they're worth $1 million, do they have the wiggle room to say, hey, I am open to making improvements, right? So let's say let's say, and we've done this where we look at a valuation and say, okay, the reason your value is this, maybe you have too much inventory, maybe you have this, maybe you need to clean, so you have these factors, and then we'll say, okay, maybe you need to clean up your expenses, this is how you can increase your revenues. So then if they do those strategies, then we can revalue the company and then say, okay, you've reached, then maybe the multiples will change, and then the income approach will change as well, the projections, right? Because if they make improvements to their margins, for example, then that affects the projections, and then that will increase the value of the income approach. But typically what we also do is we can do a range. So if it's for like a sale, we'll say, okay, the range is between 1 to like 1.5 million. Like we can do a range based on like the multiples, and then also based on the discount rate, like based on the risk that we see, and then let's say what the owner is thinking about doing in the future to improve their operations. So there is, I wouldn't say it's a wiggle room, but then we can do a range. So
Okay. All right. Looks like Danielle has another question about who needs to do the valuation. I presume this is probably going to roll right into what you do.
Oh yeah.
But basically, yeah. She was asking if it was herself or VC. Yeah. Cristina,
Okay,
why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So I guess this one, hey, thank you for for the for the guide. But yeah, but basically what I do is I'm part of Spark Vision Consulting, and what we do is we kind of do three different buckets. We create the spark for a company, igniting the flame, and we fuel the fire, which means that we create a spark by doing some of like the stuff that you need when you're starting out. So we may do an initial business valuation. And then with that one, let's say you have an initial business valuation, and then you want to improve, like your question, Phil, on like they want to increase their value. So we'll develop a business strategy so that there are ways that they can do to increase their value. So then when we do fuel the fire, that means when they're ready to actually be acquired, so when they're ready for exit, we can help them with doing either like business broker or an M&A. So a business broker, the difference is like M&A, business broker, usually if you're trying to sell a company that's less than 5 million, so it's a lot simpler. And then above 5 million, then you have to, if it gets more, the transaction gets a little bit more complicated, then you have to go to an M&A advisory firm. So we do, so we do like different, we just do different buckets. And then, also like for startups, we have and you've spoken to him, like he does the prototyping and the product development. And then he helps startups with like, whether they have an idea, whether it's like mostly products. So he'll help with like prototyping and then developing it. But so what I do is we do the business valuation, and I've done it from all the way to startups, pre-revenue companies, up to publicly traded ones. And then let me just, last one, since you're already here, and this is just my contact information. So if you guys want to, if you just have any questions, feel free to just email me, and I'll be glad to answer any of them.
Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. We have other thank yous from the chat box too.
Oh, of course.
I do have one other quick question.
Sure.
Now, when someone does sell the business, usually there's going to be another founder coming in. What happens if let's say someone's been in business for many years, and maybe they made a bad choice with hiring the president or someone like that, and the revenues have lacked? Will they look at, we're going to acquire this, we're probably going to replace the CEO? Will they look at maybe some of the prior years, or will they really just kind of look at like the more recent years?
Oh, so are you saying like if they're looking at so like if they wanted to buy a business?
Yeah.
Oh, so typically what they probably will look at like a life cycle. So let's say if there are some businesses that are cyclical, right? Either throughout the year, then they'll make sure that they see enough data to see a whole life cycle of a business. So then if it happens, like let's say if it's a business like biotech, where it takes about 7 years in order to create a product, so then they'll probably like go back, either like projected that long, and then if any historical, if they'll go back that far. So it depends. So they want to make sure that you get the whole life cycle. So
okay, all right.
But typically you don't want anything less than like 3 years. So
okay, you usually look back about 3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Cristina, I've definitely learned a lot. I think that a lot of the participants here also did. So again, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Really like the graphics and all that stuff in your presentation, and it was very easy to follow. So thank you again.
Of course.
All right. Any other questions from anybody else? Sophia, if you have any other questions, let us know. And all right, with that, I will go ahead and close it out. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for our participants. We have your contact information. If anybody here needs to get a hold of me, we're at CalState Fullerton. I'll go ahead and put my contact information in the chat window, and we help early stage startups. Those people who are really in the very beginning phase, a lot of pre-revenue startups, and happy to chat more about that as well. All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Everyone else, enjoy your day.
Thank you. You too.